Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our second live stream for Aardvark. And if you're watching, go ahead and drop a comment so that I know that you're here. And if you've got any quick questions, you could put that in there as well. What we're going to be working on today is the WCAG Easy Checks. So this is a set of simple accessibility tests anybody can do. You don't have to know code. You don't need any kind of special tools. You don't need anything fancy. Anybody could do them. And they're not obviously comprehensive accessibility testing that are going to tell you every possible accessibility issue that you have with your website, but they can be really helpful for just doing some quick checks and figuring out what's happening, what's going on, and what maybe needs to be fixed on the site to make it usable for as many people as possible. So I'm going to go through some of the tools that we're going to be using today. There's just a couple. They're all free, easy to get. So let me share my screen. All right, there we go. The website that we're going to be testing today is from WAI, the Web Accessibility Initiative, and it is a very unappealing, I guess we could say, website that the WAI has provided just for this purpose, for practicing accessibility testing. And there's a few of these floating around the web, websites made just for, testing out, learning how to test for accessibility issues, figuring things out. So this is the one we're going to use. If you're watching on LinkedIn, the link for this is in the event details. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description box. So just open that up and you can get to this website. I'm going to be using Firefox today, which is a free browser available for, all different OSs. So you should be able to use Firefox no matter what you're using. I'm going to have a couple of browser add-ons for Firefox. First up is the Web Developer add-on by Chris Pedrick. This is a free add-on. You can see it's got pretty good ratings overall, and it has some really helpful tools that are going to help us test those accessibility issues without having to dig into code and open the console and learn a bunch about HTML and all of that. The other tool that we're going to use is another free browser add-on, Color Picker for Firefox. This one doesn't have quite as many reviews, but I tested it out. It works pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and use that one today. And then the final tool that we're going to use is WebAIM's Color Contrast Checker. So we can just plug in a background color and a foreground color, and it will tell us if those are sufficient contrast to pass the WCAG guidelines. So again, the links for all of these tools are in the event details on LinkedIn or in the description box on YouTube. So you can get to those and follow along if you like. Otherwise, you could just sit back and watch, enjoy your lunch. It's lunchtime here. All right. So let's get started with our first test. So our first test on the WCAG Easy Checks is to check our page titles. And page titles are, of course, available in the code, but they are also available on the browser tab. So to do a test of the page title, if it gets cut off like it does on most browser tabs, right, they're not quite wide enough to show the whole title, just hovering over it will open this tooltip that will let you see the whole tooltip. So this demo site from WAI actually includes two different demo sites. And you can see here we have demo contents for a before demo of an inaccessible website and an after demo for an accessible website. So let's go ahead and head into the homepage of this inaccessible website, and we'll start doing our tests here. So let's go ahead and hover our mouse over that, and we can see that the page title for the homepage is Welcome to City Lights, And then it has in brackets that it's the inaccessible homepage. Let's go ahead and take a look at the news page. And this one says, welcome to City Lights inaccessible news page. So we're looking for a couple of things when we're testing the page title. We're looking to see, is the page title indicative of the content that's on the page? Is this something relevant? Does it describe the page? Does it let me know what kind of content that I'm going to expect there? And then the other thing that we use page titles for is to tell different pages of the site apart. So if I were to have the home page and the news page, so I can actually do it here, open in two different tabs, I'm probably only going to see the first part of the page title. And I can't really tell these apart just from this page title, because the part that's unique, which I can't move my mouse over it, but the part that's unique, right, is the inaccessible homepage, and it's at the end of the page title. And so when I'm not hovering over, these two look like they have the exact same title, because this one says home, but it says it toward the end. And this one does say news, but it says it toward the end. So there's a preference to put the exact page that we're on first and then the name of the site second. So you'll see that a lot online, where you'll see like homepage or about page. And then after it says that, it'll say the name of the site. So in this case, these titles could definitely be better. Well, they're technically correct. They are technically describing the page that we're looking at and letting us know what we could find here. They're not optimal. So if we go back to the overview and take a look at the after site by comparison, here we have, it says, welcome to City Lights accessible homepage, which is the same, except obviously it says accessible instead of inaccessible. And I'm going to open the news in a new tab. And now we can see that this one says City Light News. So it puts news more toward the front of that title. So it's a little bit more front loaded. So that's a little bit more handy, because now you can see that when I am not hovering to get the full title and the tooltip, I can tell these two tabs apart really easily. So that's a little bit more optimal. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for when we're testing. The page title. All right. So I think the inaccessible site actually has like okay page titles, right? They're there. That's number one. Sometimes you run into a page that doesn't have a title at all. So it does have a title, and it does have a title that describes what the page is about. And it's just the format of how it isn't optimal. So I would probably file a ticket for somebody, or I would go in and fix it myself to go in and change that so that the name of the particular page was closer to the beginning of the name. All right, our next test is going to be for image text alternatives. And let's go back to our inaccessible homepage. That's where I am, right? Inaccessible homepage. All right, I'm going to close these other browser tabs now that we've reviewed those tools. I'm going to leave this one open, the web name contrast checker. That's the only one that we need to actually have a web page open to use. All right, so let's take a look at how we can test image alt text without having to dig into code. All right, so we've got our web page open, and we're going to use the web developer toolbar for this. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and you can see that there is a tab just dealing with images. And I have a whole bunch of options here. And one thing that I can do is I can display the alt attributes of the images. So when I turn that on, I can see that every little image now has its alt attribute displayed. And we do notice that we've got quite a few images here that have no alt text displaying at all. So that's something that we definitely want to take a look at. We can also outline images that don't have alt attributes. The outline I find is a little bit too subtle for my taste, but it's better than nothing. So here we have an image that has no alt attribute. We can see that these got circled. These over here that are on the left got circled. So we have quite a few images that are missing their alt text. Another thing that we could do is we could say outline images with empty alt attributes. And let me turn this one off here. Okay, so we do have a few. We have 3 of them here that have empty alt attributes. Okay, so let's talk about these results and what kind of issues that we have here. So first of all, images with empty alt attributes. Those are on the page because they are getting specifically marked as decorative images that are not important, right? It's not important. They don't have important content in them, I guess is how I should say it. They're just there to look pretty. So images on this page that are just here to look pretty include this dotted line here, which I think actually showed up as an image without an alt attribute. So let's just double check it. Yeah, it gets circled there. So that is an image without an alt attribute, but it should actually have an empty one because this dotted line is not communicating any kind of information to us. It's just there as part of the design. So that is a decorative image, and decorative images should have empty alt tags. So the alt attribute should be on the image, but it should have no value to it. And that is the signal to assistive technology that, yes, I know this image is here, but you don't need to pay any attention to it. It's just for decoration. So when we outline images with empty alt attributes, however, we don't get this image that is obviously decorative. Instead, we get these images, which are actually, they're doing a couple of things here. They're doing 2 jobs. So first, they have text in them. They say more on them. So that's my clue that those are links that take me somewhere else. So they are not decorative. They are actually doing work. Those are what we would call functional images because they link off to some other kind of content. So that would definitely be a problem, that we have empty alt text on images that are functional and that contain text. So kind of 2 different problems that are happening there. So these should have alt text on them. Well, I mean, let's back up for a second. First, they shouldn't even be images. So, because we could very easily just have plain text that would say more and maybe have a little arrow icon after it that would take us to read more about this article. So these shouldn't even be images, right? Those should just be plain text. So that's our first issue. But let's assume, even though that looks pretty much like Arial, right, in a readily available typeface, let's assume that it's some kind of fancy typeface or some kind of decorative treatment is done to it that we could not replicate if we were just using text instead of an image. Okay, because then we can be very generous. If that were the case and an image contains text, the alt text for that image has to contain the text. It can't just be empty, right? So this text should say more. And the other rule that's happening here is that these are functional images. They're links. They're wrapped in a link. I can click on this image. I can go somewhere. So it's not just something to look at on the page. It's something I can actually interact with. And interactive images should always have alt text available on them so that I know what happens when I click on the link. So both of those issues could be solved by having alt text that just said more. But what would really solve this problem, like the best solution for this problem, would be if those weren't images at all, if they were just text. All right, let's look at the images without alt attributes. So these are images that don't have the alt attribute at all. And ideally, that should never happen on your page. Your images should always have alt attributes, and they should either be empty if it's just a decorative image, or they should contain some helpful text if it's an image that's conveying some kind of information. So it has some kind of, a photo of somebody that the article is about. If it's got a map or a chart or a graph or anything like that, the alt text should communicate that same information as just text. And if it is a functional image, which we just talked about, so it's an image that acts as a link or it acts as a button, it should have some alt text that explains what's going to happen when you interact with it. So just like these links here should say more so that I understand, oh, when I click that link, it's going to take me somewhere. So these right here would be functional images. But again, we have that same problem, right? So if we take a step back, yes, it's a problem that we have a functional image here that doesn't have alt text on it. But taking a step back from that, the real problem is that the text part of these images, right, shouldn't even be images. We could just have this little graphic here and then actual text typed into the page. That would make these links work better. So I'm curious if we jump over to the accessible version of the homepage, what do we have here? And if I go to, and I say outline images without all attributes, yeah, they're not outlined. And I think these are text, yes. So see how I can select those? So those are actual text. So this would be the ideal way to do it. And then we can also see here that these have been replaced. Those little more images have been replaced with real text, right? That I can, it's a little hard to select because it's a link, but there we go. Real text that doesn't just say more, it tells me where I'm going, right? So it doesn't just say more, it tells me, oh, get the full story about the heat wave, get the full story about the violin case, or get the full story about brain donations. All right, and if I were to say outline images with empty alt attributes, all right. So these all get outlined, and I think that was the only thing on the page. It is a little bit subtle, but I don't see anything else. So the author of this page has decided that those images are decorative, that they're not communicating any information. I would say that's definitely up for debate. Definitely some accessibility workers would think that those were not decorative images, that they are conveying some information about, this man wearing a shady hat to be outside in a heat wave to do his work. That definitely conveys a sense of that heat wave. And I personally wouldn't think that that's a decorative image, but WAI seems to think so. All right, let's go back to our inaccessible homepage and keep checking. Okay, so we checked for images that were missing their alt attribute. We checked for images that had empty alt attributes. We didn't actually double check the alt attributes that are there. So let's go back to this display alt attributes. All right, so here we have, again, not a great design pattern. We have a phone number, which is in an image, and our alt text is there and does not give us the same information. So that is definitely a problem, right? If the image says the phone number is this number, but then our alt text says the phone number is this number, somebody who can't see that image is going to have the wrong phone number. They're not going to be able to call it. So that alt text is not appropriate, and we would definitely want to flag that and get that fixed. Next, I see these are called alt bullet, and I would say that these are decorative images. They're just there to kind of make those little links stand out, and I would say that those should probably have empty alt attributes, We've already talked about these more links, and we've taken a look at how those get fixed on the accessible part of the site. And then we have a really long alternative text here on this logo that appears at the top. Very detailed description of what this logo looks like that goes on for 7 lines or so, which is a little bit much. So let's switch over. I think I could do it here. Yeah, let's switch over to the accessible version of the home page and take a look at what we have there. So here we have city lights, your access to the city, which you notice is the text that appears in the image. So I know that I said earlier that if you have images that contain text, it's better to use real text in the page rather than an image of text. And I would say that a logo is kind of one of the exceptions for that rule, because a logo is normally very stylized, and the owner of that company or that brand is going to want to make sure that it looks exactly the same and uses the exact same font and the exact same colors under all circumstances. So that would be one exception to that rule, where you don't want to have, an image of text. So here we have an image of text, but we have that same text repeated in the alt attribute. So everything is good. We've added alt text for sunny spells to this sunshine graphic that's at the top of the page. These images were missing alt text attributes altogether on the bad page, and now they have alternative text. I do think it's interesting, just as a side note, that the authors of this page thought that these 2 images needed alt text, but that these 3 didn't. Just an interesting observation. I personally think all 5 of them could use alt text. And you can see here, no alt text on these, just decorative images. No alt text on these little arrows, no alt text on these little arrows, right? All just decorative images. No alt text on these little icons that are over here. Strictly decorative images. All right, so that is our image alternative checks. Next up, we're going to check for headings. So headings, using heading tags in our HTML or using heading tags in, the WordPress block editor or our Drupal editor or any kind of, if you're using Wix or Weebly or Squarespace, any of those, you're going to have an option to insert headings onto a page. And the headings don't just make the text large and bold. They actually have meaning to them. They actually help us to structure our document so that it's easy to understand. And so what we want to do is check and make sure that we're using headings in a good way. So let's go over to an accessible version of the homepage again. And this time we're going to head over. We're going to just quickly review the page. So we have city lights for access to the city. We have welcome to city lights. That seems like a heading. And then each of these 3 articles has what looks like a heading. Heat wave, man gets 9 months in violin case, lack of brains hinders research. So those all seem like headings. That would be maybe under this heading. And then we have elsewhere on the web, looks like a heading. We have free penguins, which looks like a heading. And we have more city parks, which also looks like a heading. So let's go ahead and go to this one. And we'll go to, I think it's information and view document outline. And it's going to open a new tab in the browser and show us our document outline, which has one heading in it, which is not even part of the actual page that we're testing. It's part of this wrapper, right? This part up here, right? We're really pretending just this part is our website. So there's no headings at all on this page. So let's take a look at what's going on over here, because we definitely. Oh yes, I did mean to close that tab. Thank you. All right. Another thing that we can do over here is we can display. Oh, is it not on this tab? I thought it was. Hold on. Oh, maybe it's outline. Outline headings. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Outline headings. And we can see, yep, it just outlines this one. Let's go over to the accessible version of the homepage and try these same things. So first, let's go to Information and go to View Document Outline. And here we have a much more helpful outline. So this part up here is part of this, this wrapper that introduces the page that we're testing. So we could just ignore that. And here's the actual page that we're testing. So this looks great. We have an H1 that tells us the main idea of the page. Then we have H2s for each of those 3 articles, an H2 for elsewhere on the web, an H2 for City Lights Concert, and an H2 for City Lights Survey. Oh, I see. City Lights Concert, City Lights Survey. All right. That's where those appear. So this one, this one, this one, this one. All right. And I can close that and go back over here and go to Outline Headings. And now we can see all of our headings that are on our page. Welcome to City Lights. These are all headings. So same information, just presented in a different way. And when we're looking at these headings, we're checking for a few different things. First, we're checking to see if they're there at all. So on our inaccessible page, there's no headings at all. So that's definitely a problem that we would want to flag and get that fixed. If there are headings there, we want to make sure that they're used in the right order. We want it. Oh, and by that I mean the main idea for the page should be the H1 that's on the page, which we have here. This Welcome to City Lights is our H1. And then any subsections that appear under that would get H2. So these are each an H2. This is an H2. This is an H2, and this is an H2. If there was a separate heading here for like most recent news, in that case, that would probably be an H2 because we would have a recent news section of the page. And then these would be H3 because they would be in that recent news section. So that's one thing that we're checking for with headings is, are they there? And then are they used in the correct structure? With used in order, so that an H1 is the main idea of the page, H2 are any sections of the page, H3 are subsections of those sections, etc. And it goes all the way down to H6, but you barely ever see much past H3 or H4 actually used on the web. The next thing that we want to check for with headings is that they actually describe the bit of content that comes after them. So we're on the accessible version of the homepage, which is all we have to look at because there's no headings at all on the inaccessible version. So we want to check and make sure that when we have this heading, this describes the block of content that comes right after it. So heat wave is linked to temperatures. We have a little description. So yes, this heading does describe this little bit of text here, and same for this one, same for this one. This one describes this little section for elsewhere on the web. City Lights Concert describes this little block of content here. City Lights Survey describes this little block of content here. So our headings are all correctly used. They're using the right levels, and they're all describing the content that comes right after them. So that's our heading check. I'm going to head back on over to the inaccessible page. And we're going to take a look at some color contrast issues. And that is where this color picker browser add-on comes in. So we want to make sure that anywhere, okay, let me turn that off. All right, we want to make sure that anywhere on the site that we have text on a background color, and don't forget white and black count as background colors, that there is enough contrast between the text and what's behind it, so that it's easily legible. And often when you look at text, right, this is black text on a white background. No problem. Plenty of contrast there. No problems at all. But when we get to something like this, where we've got this sort of slate blue background and there's some darker slate blue text on top of it, that might pass, but it might not. We're going to double check it. We're just going to make sure. So I'm going to go ahead and get this color picker, and I'm going to move it over our background color. And this tool is really nice because it will pop up the hex code there, and I can just copy that. So Control C if you're on Windows or Command C if you're on Mac. And I'm going to go over to my color contrast checker. That's my background color, so I'm going to paste it in there. And I'm going to come back over and I'm going to do the same thing to get that foreground color. So there's the color of our text, and I'm just going to copy that and put that over in the foreground. And here is our color contrast ratio. It does not pass. So here's how to read the results of this color contrast picker. We're actually testing several things at the same time. And so it can be okay if some of these say fail. So let me explain how it all works. So most of the time when we're testing for color contrast, we are testing at the AA level. So if this AAA one says fail, that could be okay. If you're not explicitly testing for contrast at the AAA level, it is okay if AAA says fail, if you only need to pass AA. So we don't necessarily have to pay attention. Since I'm going to test this page for the AA level today, we don't necessarily have to pay attention to these failure messages that are on AAA. And then you can see that we're actually testing the contrast on 3 different things. We're testing it for normal text, we're testing it for large text, and we're testing it for graphical objects, which are things like icons, form inputs, and other things like that. So if this was large text, it would actually pass at the AA level. But this text looks very small. Now we would have to kind of dig into some code to actually figure out the exact size. But roughly this large text, I think it's actually over here. It should be 14 points or 18.66 pixels or larger is the actual definition. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 18.66 if it's bold, or it's 24 pixels large if it's just regular weight text. So this actually looks bold to me. So I think the 18.66 would apply. And honestly, that looks like it's right on that border. It could be counted as large text or it might not. So if it is, this technically passes. If it's not, if it's actually a little bit smaller than that, this would actually fail. So let me pop over to the accessible version of the homepage and let's look at that. Okay. So they did actually change that background color pretty significantly. So I suspect that that is supposed to be a fail. I think that that doesn't count as large text. And you can see that they have used the same kind of light gray color that is used elsewhere on the page, and they've made the text black. All right, let's head back over here again and let's look for any other areas where the color contrast looks a little suspect. We could just double check this blue color here. It does look a little bit light. I think it's probably okay, but we'll just double check. All right, so just grab that, Control C, put that over here as the foreground color, and we're going to put our background color back to white, which is just 6 letter Fs. All right, and that does pass. So you can see that this fails at the AAA level, but that's okay because we're not testing at AAA level. It passes at AA, so we're good. All right, let's take a look at, let me get rid of this. All right, let's take a look at some of the other pages. Let's see if we see anything that looks like it might not pass. Color contrast. Actually, oh, that looks pretty good. That text at the bottom. Let's look at the tickets page. I think we have that same problem. This looks very similar to what we saw on the home page, where we have that kind of darker slate blue on a lighter slate blue background. So I think that would be the same failure. And we could double check the accessible page. And yes, they did actually change that. But I think that's the same colors that we just tested. So we don't need to check that again. We can look at the survey page. And everything there looks okay. All right, but if you have any doubt about a color contrast pair, you definitely want to check the background color, check the foreground color, and make sure that there is enough contrast between them for the size of the text. All right, so our next check that we're going to do is text resizing. We want to make sure that we can resize the text in our browser up to 200% without causing any issues. And how you do that is very easy. On Windows, it's Control and the plus sign, and on Mac, it's Command and the plus sign. And you can see right here on the browser, it tells me where I am, and I want to go all the way to 200. All right, this is our requirement. And let's take a look at how this page looks. So, obviously, the design is not as aesthetically pleasing as it was when the text was smaller. But I don't see a lot of terrible issues here. I do see this word gets a little bit long and it moves outside of its box, but I can actually see all of it. Now, I do have the end of the word temperature getting cut off there. And it took me over to another page. Let's go back. So that would be an issue. We have another word getting kind of cut off there. That's definitely a problem. All in all, not too terrible. Definitely some things that would need to be looked at and touched up. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at some of the other pages. This one actually seems okay. And we want to make sure that we're not losing any content. And we also want to make sure that we're not losing any functionality. Right, so if there's a button or a link there, we want to make sure that we can still get to it, that it's not being hidden away. Now you do notice, this is a good thing for me to point out here. Let's go back to the home page. You do notice that when I made the text bigger, these navigation buttons didn't get bigger, and that is because they are images, right? So making the text bigger doesn't make them bigger. And the same thing with these little more links that are also images, those also don't get bigger. All right, let's go back to our tickets page. Let's take a look. We have a lot of tables here, which is going to get a little bit tricky. So we definitely have some things kind of running into one another. It gets a little bit difficult to read. We've got another image of a phone number that didn't get larger when we zoomed in. So that's a problem. If somebody needs the text to be this large, they're not going to be able to see that phone number. And let's look at our survey page. So here we see this is bumping out a little bit. It's okay. I can still read it all. I'm not missing any content, and I can see my submit button. I can see all the form inputs. So I think I'm doing okay, actually. Let's compare this to the accessible version of the page. So you can see that here, care has been taken to actually make this design more responsive. And so when we zoom in on it, it still looks nice. It's still very aesthetically pleasing. And even though in the other one, technically, there was just a couple of cases where we actually lost content or lost, and I don't think there was anywhere actually that we lost functionality. Even though we didn't technically lose it, right? It did get kind of confusing and things were really close together and a lot of text was crammed into a very narrow design. So this is definitely preferable, right? Like this is way better. Right? These aren't all getting run together now. It's very easy to tell them apart. My phone numbers are real phone numbers and they are real text rather. And so they get larger when I make the site larger. Let's go back to the news page, right? The layout still works. The layout basically just got bigger instead of trying to squeeze bigger and bigger text into those same small areas. And our home page, right? It still looks pretty much the same. It's just that it's bigger. And now we see these links got bigger. These links got bigger, right? Because we're using more things that are real text. And so they resize. So once you have zoomed in like this, you can control minus or on a Windows or command minus on a Mac to go back, but you can also control 0 or command 0 to just automatically put it back to 100% zoom. So you don't have to do it in all those separate keyboard presses. All right, let's go back to the inaccessible homepage. The next test we're going to work on is keyboard access and visual focus. So we have lots of different types of users who just use a keyboard. To use websites, they cannot use a mouse for whatever reason, or maybe they just don't prefer to and need to be able to navigate websites with just a keyboard. So I'm going to start tabbing through. So that's a little odd that I get an outline on what appears to be nothing, but all right. So now we can see that focus, right? We see this blue ring here. Focus has moved to this quick menu. So I'm just going to hit the enter key or the spacebar key. There we go. And make sure that I can actually use this without my mouse, right? My mouse is over here. I'm going to put it over here, not moving it. You can see, let me just touch it for a second. My mouse cursor is right here. It's not going to move, right? So can I actually choose public libraries? I can. All right. And now let's see. Can I go back, start over? I can. Okay, and let's go to the inaccessible homepage. So you see that's all happening with just the keyboard. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here. So that quick menu seemed to work just fine. All right, so I'm on the quick menu. I hit the tab key. And where is my focus right now? I have no idea. I can't tell. So this is an issue that needs to be fixed. I need to be able to tell what I have moved my focus to, and I can't see it on the screen. So I'm just going to hit tab again and see what happens. And we're back at the quick menu. All right, now it's nowhere. And we're back at the quick menu. All right, have you spotted the problem here? We have what is called a keyboard trap, where we are between something and this quick menu and we can't get out. Right? I can keep hitting tab and all I'm going to do is move between this mystery element, wherever the focus is now, and this quick menu. So we have a keyboard trap. So we would want to get that fixed. That is definitely a problem. So I am going to have to click with my mouse kind of down here to move focus over here. And tab, tab, tab. I do not see where my focus is at all. Tab, 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 tab. No idea. All right, let's switch back over to the accessible homepage and kind of see what we have here. All right, did that work? Skip to accessible demo page. Okay, there we go. All right, so we tab here, and the first thing we get is a skip to content within the demo page link. Great, this is really helpful. If I am navigating a page with just my keyboard, it gets really tiresome when I have to tab past all the stuff in the header, past all the stuff in the sidebar, just to get to the content that's in the middle of the page. So here I have the option to just skip past all that. And now I'm just in the middle of the page content. And I don't have to worry about tabbing to get through all that other information. Now, on this example site, there's not a ton of stuff here, right? There's this header, there's this quick menu, and there's 4 links over here. So it's not that terrible, but lots of sites have way more than that, right, happening in the header. And you can imagine how annoying it would be if you had to tab past. There are sites that literally have hundreds of links in their main heading at the top, right, that open as you tab through. So having a way to skip past that is great. So to move backward, we just use Shift Tab, and I can go backward. Here's my quick menu. Let's double check and make sure that that works with just the keyboard. So Fire Service. And now instead of jumping directly to another page, I have to tab again and hit this Go button. So there we go. All right, let me go back to my accessible homepage. All right, here we are. All right, so now we can see that we're on news, we're on tickets, we're on survey. We have a very visible focus indicator that tells me where my mouse is, right? It's not just a blue ring around the text, but we're also changing the background color to this red color, and we're changing the foreground color to white. So it's really obvious at a glance where the focus is on the page. And I can get to all of these links. I can read more about killer bees. I can read more about onions. I can buy tickets for the City Lights concert. I could take a survey in the City Lights survey, and then I can get to all of those copyright links at the bottom. And we would just want to make sure on each of those, right, that I would want to actually hit the enter key to make sure that I could follow it. And that just takes me back here. All right, there we go. All right, so our accessible page is in pretty good shape. Our inaccessible page is not, right? Like we don't have a skip link. We have a keyboard trap. And even when we move past that keyboard trap, we cannot tell where our focus is. And in fact, I'm not even sure the focus is moving anywhere. I think we can't get past that trap. Let's see if it's still on the next page, or on the news page rather. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's on every page of the site because it happens in that header. So that's something that we would definitely want to get fixed. And then also right now there's focus on something on the page, but we can't even see what it is. So that's another problem that we would want to get fixed. We want to be able to tell where the focus is at any given time. All right, so that is our keyboard test. Let's go ahead and look at forms. And I think probably if we go to the inaccessible survey page, that's going to be our best spot for checking out forms. And with forms, we want to check a few different things. First thing that we want to do is hit the submit key and see what happens. We get back some error messages because of course you can't submit an empty form. On most forms on the internet anyway don't want to be submitted completely empty. And here we have, we do have some error messages. Well, no, we have an error indicator, I guess, in that this text turned red, right? So before, if I click back to, let's go back. So before I hit submit, this question was black and this question was black. And then after I hit submit and there's an error, that text turns to red. So if I can perceive the text and I can perceive the color red, I could probably work out that there's an error with that form, but it's not very clear, is it? It doesn't really tell me that that field is required, right? There's no indicator on the screen that tells me that I have to pick a favorite city park. And there's no indicator on the screen that tells me that I have to choose a greenest city. So that's one problem. Another problem that we have here is that there's no instructions or helpful information about what the problem is. I would have liked to have seen some kind of message here that says, oh, you have to pick a favorite city park, and oh, you have to pick the greenest city. You have to make a choice. So it looks like the newsletter part, at least, is optional. Right? So we don't have to fill in anything here, but we should make choices in both of these. So I just want to pop over to the accessible survey page and try this same test to see what happens over here as an example of hopefully what we're looking for. All right, yes. So this is much better. This is much, much better because we can see now that we have to select one of the following. We have to select one of the following. We get a nice error message at the top of the screen that tells me what the problem is. You have not selected a favorite park. You have not selected a greenest city. And it looks like, yep, those are links that jump me right down to where that's missing in the form, which would be helpful, right? If I'm not using my mouse. Mouse is over there. Here's my mouse cursor. There we go. So you can see it. If I'm a keyboard user and it says, oh, you've not selected a favorite park, well, this is a very short form, but if it was a long form, I'd have to now tab through it and look for that field. But because this link is here, I could just click that link by hitting the enter key. And now here I am right on the form field that has a problem. If you don't know how to use a set of radio buttons, which is the keyboard, you can tab to get into or out of the radio set or shift tab to go the other way. And then once you are in it, you can use your arrow keys to actually move between the selections and make a choice. So we'll pick Central Park. And then we have to pick a greenest city. So we'll go ahead and pick one of those. Okay, tab, and I'm going to hit this submit button. Okay, great. So that worked. We're on the accessible version of the page. Let's try that on the inaccessible version of the page. Okay, I'm just going to tab. Let me make a selection. Okay, make a selection here. This is an interesting difference. So you notice that on the previous form, when I was selecting a city, they were divided up into groups so that I could go to very easily find things that were in different parts of the world, which is a really helpful thing to do if you have lots and lots of options in a dropdown to make it a little bit easier for people to find things. All right, and we can tab. Can we submit? We can. All right. We don't get any kind of confirmation message back on the inaccessible form, which we would want to have. We would want to have something to let the user know, hey, that worked great. You submitted your form. It all worked just as expected. All right, let's go back over here to this page again. All right, so we went over checking for error messages. Let's also now check for forms or for labels. Labels on our form inputs. So obviously there's some pretty detailed tests that you could do if you look at the HTML, but you can actually check for form labels without having to dig into code. If I were to click this label, it should check this checkbox, but you can see that that's not happening. And so I know now that I have an issue on this form, that I have visible labels, but they are not programmatically tied to the form inputs. So let's go to the accessible page so I can just show you what that looks like. You can see that I can click on the word Central Park, and and I can check that radio box. And here I can click on which city do you find is greenest. No, actually that doesn't work. I wonder if that's wrong. All right, I should be able to click on that and it should focus the form. So here you can see the Mr. and Mrs. doesn't focus the Mr. and Mrs. We also have this name label, which is presumably for this field input over here, but it's in completely the wrong place. So we would want to get that fixed so that the label is next to the form, the field that it's actually connected to. Clicking on email address and retype email, they don't focus these form fields. Let's go back over here and take a look. So here we have Mr. and Mrs., and I can click on the label to check one of the radio boxes. We'll just ignore the problem that not everybody is a Mr. or Mrs. That's a separate issue. I can click name, and you can see that it moves focus into that name field, and I can type my name. And the same thing happens when I click on these two fields. And then you can also see that the appearance on this form is a little bit different, and that's because this is using field sets and legends. I wanted to call that out because it was a pretty visible difference. So here they've been left with kind of their default styles, and so it's pretty easy to pick them up. But that is something that you would have to dig into the code a little bit most of the time to be able to tell if field sets and legends were correctly used. Or you would have to try to use the form with a screen reader, which we'll do in a future live stream. I'll show you how to test pages with a screen reader. All right, so we have checked for error messages. We've checked for required fields being indicated. We have checked for labels. We have, let's see, what else could we check? I think that's probably all we can check on forms without digging into code, and that's not what we're doing today. So let's go back to our inaccessible homepage. All right, the next WCAG Easy Check is for moving, flashing, or blinking content. I haven't seen any of that anywhere on the site, but I'm sure that you have been to a website where you have seen a huge video that's playing automatically, all kinds of animations happening, right? All of those are actually accessibility violations. Those can cause problems for a lot of people. So we want to avoid doing that. We can actually make people physically ill by including things that move on a web page automatically. So we want to avoid that if we can. And I'm just going to click through here again just to double check, but I feel like I definitely would have noticed if there was something moving, flashing, or blinking in here. And yeah, there's nothing. So that would be another quick and easy check, is to just go through, is there anything moving, flashing, or blinking? There are some rules that it's okay for it to happen for, I think it's 3 seconds, right? Then it's okay, or it's 5 seconds, I'm sorry. So if it lasts more than 5 seconds, that's something that we would definitely want to get fixed. If it does happen for more than 5 seconds, we would want to make sure that there is a way for the user to pause, stop, or hide that content. So there is a WCAG, oh, sorry, I hit the microphone. There is a WCAG success criteria called pause, stop, hide. It's 2.2.2 that says the user has to be able to pause, stop, or hide any kind of movement that's happening on the page. And then there's also rules for content that updates automatically. So if you think of, a news ticker that slides across the screen while you're watching the news, or if you think of like a stock ticker, maybe that's constantly bringing in new stock prices, all of those have to be controllable by the user so that they can pause or stop those things if they don't want it happening. And then for flashing content, you want to make sure that there's nothing that is flashing on the screen more than 3 times in 1 second, because that can trigger seizures in people who have seizure disorders, right? And we don't want to physically harm anybody with our web design. So we want to go through the website, make sure that there's nothing flashing, blinking, scrolling, moving, animating. And that if that does happen to be there, it flashes less than 3 times per second. The animation or whatever it is that's happening happens for less than 5 seconds. And if it absolutely positively has to be there for some reason, that there is a way for the user to pause, stop, or hide it if they need to. All right, our next easy check is for multimedia. And I actually think besides the images on this site, I didn't see any multimedia. But just as a quick thing to let you know, yeah, I don't think there's any video or audio or anything on here. So just a quick review to let you know what you should be looking for on pages that do happen to have audio or video. First, you would want to make sure that you can control the player with your keyboard, right? So just like we tabbed through and tried to make sure we could use everything with just the keyboard, you would want to make sure that you can do that with an audio player. Can you play the video? Can you pause it? Can you adjust the volume, etc.? All of the things that you can do, clicking on buttons with your mouse. Can you do those same things with your keyboard and control the video player? So that's one thing that you want to check for. If it auto plays, right? If it lasts more than 5 seconds, there has to be a way for the user to pause, stop, or hide it. And it should only autoplay if it's absolutely positively necessary. We would want to make sure that there are captions or subtitles. Sometimes they get called, available for people who cannot hear the audio or the video, that there is captions or subtitles or a transcript available so that that content is available. And then another one that gets forgotten about quite often is an audio description. So an audio description is for somebody who can hear the video, but they cannot see it. And it basically takes any information that's presented visually in the video and ensures that it is available in the audio. And if you want to know what that's like, there is a website called YouDescribe that has YouTube videos with audio description added to them. And actually on a lot of services like Netflix and things like that, you can turn on audio description, just like you can turn on the captions. You could try that out and see what it sounds like. So just anything that happens visually on the screen that's important gets described in addition to the regular audio track, so that if you can't see the screen, you understand what's happening, right? If somebody walks into a room and everybody just goes, oh, well, you have no idea why everyone is gasping if you can't see who just walked into the room, right? So an audio description track would just say, oh, the villain just entered, so that everybody would know what just happened. All right. The last thing that we're going to look at today before we wrap up this live stream is just a basic structure check. And that is just to make sure that our page is constructed in a good way. And we're going to go back to this web developer tool for that. And we're going to go to CSS tab and say disable all styles. And I think that didn't work because this is an iframe. All right. Let me just go, let me go do this on another site on the web just so we can get a feel for what this looks like. So this is a test site that we have set up with, let's put it on the fail version. So this is a test site just for testing, just for accessibility testing from Aardvark, disable all styles. All right, so this is what your page looks like with no CSS styles applied. And this is basically how the page is going to be experienced by somebody who's using assistive technology to get access to your content. So it's nice to go ahead and take a look through this. Does it make sense still? So we have our logo at the top. We have some buttons that control the menu, which don't really make sense anymore, but that's okay because our menus aren't hidden or anything like that. Once we've turned off the CSS, we have a list that is our navigation at the top of the page, a heading, and some content. And this heading does actually describe this content, so that's good. We have a make a reservation heading with a form. And probably this should actually be a field set with a legend, right? Because here we have a set of fields that are taking us to, that are letting us make a reservation. We're putting in their destination, our from or to, and our guest. So these fields are all closely related to one another. And probably this shouldn't be a heading. It should probably be a legend. And this should be wrapped in a field set, which we can tell that that field set's not here because it would look similar to, let me go back over here. Let's refresh. If we look at the accessible survey page, this is what a field set looks like when it doesn't have CSS styles applied to it. So it would look something like that. We have a big image. Let's go ahead and turn on our alt attributes so we can just double check those. So we have an MD alt attribute. So we're saying that's a decorative image. This one has an alt of Discover Venus. Okay, a heading with a section of content, a heading with a section of content, a lot of empty alt attributes. So the author of this page is saying that these are all decorative images, and we can decide if we think that's the case or not. I would say probably not the case. And then here we have, it looks like probably an H2. I think, can we actually display title attributes, ID, element information? Is that what I want? No. I'll select an element. Okay. All right, yeah, so this does let me know. This is an H2, and then this is an H3. So I can actually tell. That's pretty nice. Here's my H2 of packages. I have an H3 for mountains, and then I have an H4. So I've got 3 different mountain packages. And then I have volcanoes is another H3, and I have 3 different volcano options. So just to refresh this page to remind you what this looked like before, here we have a packages section of the page. That would be this whole section. And then we have a subsection for mountains. And we have subsections, like 3 of them under that, right? For 3 different mountain packages, a volcanoes with 3, and then a plains for 3. So if I were to go back to turning off all of the CSS, then this structure makes sense. And it's actually pretty well structured for a page that fails. I should probably go in and add more mistakes to this page. All right. Then we have our exclusive tour, which is that big section at the bottom. We have not ready to join yet. And then we have the credits section at the bottom, which is actually pretty nicely structured. Now, we do have an issue here where we have 3 empty. Let's go in and information display ID and class. I actually thought there was a way to display the tag names, but maybe I misremember. Okay, maybe I just misremember that. All right, we can do this in element information though. So we could click on these and figure out what the heck is going on. Let's take a look. So it is a list item. And I think if I refresh this page, we can see what those are. They are the social media links. And I think we don't see them there because they have a white background. They are, partially transparent here, which is why they appear to be so dark. But they do have a white background. And so when we remove the CSS, we basically have a white background on a white, or a white image on a white background, which is why we can't see them. So in that case, we would want to go to images and display all attributes, and they don't have all attributes. So there's definitely an issue there. So you do want to take a, just take a look and scan your pages. It's obviously not going to be aesthetically pleasing. It's not going to have the layout. It's not going to have the design, but it should still make sense. The basic structure of the page should still be good. It should still let you know what the sections of the page are, what the subsections of the page are, and you should still be able to get to all the content in a way that makes sense. All right, that is our last WCAG Easy Check that we're taking a look at today. So just a reminder, this is not comprehensive accessibility testing, but it is quick and easy testing anybody can do. No need to know how to use code, no need for any kind of fancy tools. And it can help you find some very important accessibility issues and get those fixed. So thank you for joining me today. The links for all of the tools that I used in the video today and the websites that I used are either in the event details on LinkedIn or in the description box on YouTube. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the comments and we'll get back to you with answers for those. And if you want to get more involved in accessibility testing, definitely give Aardvark a try. You can go to a20y.com and test your homepage for free. No credit card required. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to having another live stream with you in another couple of weeks. And I think maybe we'll try to do some screen reader use with VoiceOver and see what accessibility testing looks like when we're using a screen reader. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a great week.